Hello. If you're new to the channel, welcome to my show, On Thin Ice. I'm Philip, your perpetually well-dressed host, and where most birds have their heads in the clouds, I've got both flippers planted firmly on the ground. If you're not new to the channel, welcome back. I hope the Arctic chill hasn't diminished my warm welcome. If it hasn't, feel free to settle in with me as we explore today's particular fancy. Before I do though, thank you for watching. I do hope you enjoy. The man was woken up by the sounds of sirens wailing down the street past his house. He groggily opened his eyes to see the flash of lights passing his window. Peering through the blinds, he could see their taillights as they drove away. Fire engines. He shifted his gaze to the horizon and saw an unmistakable glow of orange, accompanied by a rising pillar of smoke. Something was burning. He threw on his clothes and ran out the door. Upon arriving at the scene, a rather large fire had begun on the steps in front of the town's public library. He quickly realized, much to his horror, that he recognized the material that had been used to fuel the fire. Copies of the book he had authored. Even though this anecdote is most definitely dramatized and exaggerated, it is based on the many challenges of reality facing author John Steinbeck in his hometown of Salinas, California. Not only did a book burning of The Grapes of Wrath actually take place, but it was not an isolated incident, as the book was burned many times over and was even banned by certain local governments. The Grapes of Wrath certainly wasn't Steinbeck's only contentious work. Of Mice and Men has also found itself at the receiving end of several bans, and Steinbeck's integrity was placed under scrutiny when the decision was made to change the book he wrote alongside his late friend Dr. Edward Ricketts, The Sea of Cortez, by removing Doc from his rightful place as co-author. Even what should have been his crowning achievement, winning the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1962, was drowned out by the public's widely negative response to his reception of said award, with quotes such as, "one of the Academy's biggest mistakes," an author whose limited talent is, in his best books, watered down by 10th-rate philosophizing, and the best of a bad lot. Scathing reviews, to say the least. But why? What exactly did Steinbeck do to deserve such treatment at the hands of his critics? And does he truly deserve his place as a classic American author? Today, we'll be discussing potential answers to those questions, as well as examining the modern legacy surrounding John Steinbeck. Let's get the basic biographical context out of the way first. John Ernest Steinbeck was born in 1902 in Salinas, California, where he would spend a good deal of his life. From there, he would graduate from the local high school and attend Stanford University in 1919, where he would study English literature for 6 years until he left in 1925, having not earned a degree. From there, he tried, and failed, to publish his work in New York City, eventually moving back to Northern California to work as a tour guide in the beautiful Lake Tahoe area. He finally managed to get a book published in 1927, The Cup of Gold. Steinbeck's career as a writer finally took off as he wrote and published around 30 books through the 1960s. For those of you who are not familiar with California, allow me to take a moment to explain it to you. Yes, I am aware of my status as a penguin, but have you considered that I might be a well-traveled penguin? Huh? Never thought of that? Look, whatever mental image you conjure up in your mind about the beautiful sun-kissed sandy beaches and palm trees of California is most definitely not true of the entire state. Salinas is rough. A simple Google search would be enough to prove that point. It's been rough too. Ever since Steinbeck's time, it has not been a glamorous place by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, recent statistics show that the probability of being a victim of violent or property crime is 1 in 43, according to FBI-sourced crime data. It's more dangerous than 67% of California towns and cities. Despite its close proximity to the beautiful Monterey Bay and its close ties to the enigmatic Steinbeck, it hasn't ever really caught on as a desirable place to live, so to speak. Though Salinas is not exactly an ideal place to be, the flaws and imperfections readily evident in this small, Central California town clearly captivated Steinbeck and followed him wherever he went, a truth that is on full display in his writing. Of the roughly 30 books he authored, nearly all of them have something to do with Central California, if not taking place in Salinas outright. Some of the notable titles among these include Of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden, In Dubious Battle, and Cannery Row. These works captured, in Steinbeck's own way, the beauty, bizarreness, heartbreak, injustice, and ironic humor of the world. Steinbeck's work, for better or for worse, cannot be truly discussed without mentioning politics. Indeed, the messages of Steinbeck's stories are not bashful about reflecting his sympathies for left-leaning political ideologies such as socialism and labor unions. It was this very political polarization, in fact, that was preyed upon by his biggest detractors. Following Steinbeck's Nobel Prize win in 1962, biographer Jackson Benton lamented, "This honor was one of the few in the world that one could not buy or gain by political maneuver." This begs the question: should literary works that lean too far into their political roots be consigned to the scrap heap of meaningless products of their time with no real staying power or reach beyond the context in which they were wrought? This question is one that has plagued critics for decades, eventually dividing them between two groups in the latter half of the 20th century. The conservatives, who believed in the preservation and continual study of the great books of history, and the liberals, who believed in an expanded canon meant to include not just books from all kinds of minorities and otherwise underrepresented groups from history, but to consider historical context as a key component of a full understanding of literature. In many cases, the conservative side of this argument was in favor of formalism, which is the study of the form a work takes, independent of its deeper meaning, historical context, political motivations, so on and so forth. It also so happens that during Steinbeck's time, many of the more established literary critics and custodians of culture in the West were conservatives, with those of a liberal persuasion still being considered as rebels and contrarians whose opinions on literature served to do little more than stir the metaphorical pot. It makes sense, then, that Steinbeck's Nobel Prize win would have given cause for complaint amongst the established literary and intellectual elite of the time. But the rejection of Steinbeck goes even further than that. In order to explain my next point, it is requisite that I define a term that may be familiar to many of you. That term is kitsch. Kitsch is a German word whose best English stand-in is bad or poor taste. Kitsch is meant to describe all the vapid, pointless, consumer-oriented, market-based culture that is widely consumed by the quote-unquote uncultured masses. There is no enduring quality that can be ascribed to kitsch, and while kitsch can produce decent or even good art, it never does so on purpose. Kitsch is meant to be bought and sold on a massive scale. In other words, calling something kitsch is just about the meanest thing you could say about someone's art, especially when their intention was not to create kitsch. Yes, kitsch is one of the more common words used by critics to describe Steinbeck's work. Their argument seemed to be that Steinbeck was too accessible or too popular to have any permanent place in the literary canon of great Western books. It's the same argument levied against artists such as Imagine Dragons, J.K. Rowling, Thomas Kinkade, and Norman Rockwell. Being popular was their goal from the start, to the detriment of art for art's sake, or of real substantive creation. Here's the crux of today's episode, the crossroads where I finally reveal my hand. I think the very thing that has endeared so many people to Steinbeck is also the very thing that opens himself up to such scrutiny: nostalgia. It's the reason why he can't stop writing about California, or using the grand existential issues surrounding the human condition as his principal subject matter. Steinbeck, as a misty-eyed philosopher, generates more misty-eyed philosophers through his work. Who'da thunk it? Furthermore, Steinbeck's nostalgic musings on the purpose of life is a very accessible topic to pretty much anyone with working brain cells, which is a big reason why the bigwigs of literature largely did not take his work seriously. Nostalgia and over-romanticization is probably the single biggest and most valid anti-Steinbeck stance. There is one big problem with this argument, though. Being popular doesn't make something bad or kitsch, just like being obscure doesn't make something underappreciated or true art. Mass popularity is, in my mind, an honestly poor indicator of the quality of something. Believe it or not, things can be both very popular and very good. The attempts of others to disparage the enjoyment of popular art simply because it's popular is reductive and closed-minded, which is similar, ironically, to the very people they're criticizing. Cannery Row is my favorite book by John Steinbeck, It captures a beautiful ambiguity about life, and, through its meandering little vignettes and seemingly unrelated side quests, illustrates the broadness of the collective human experience. This book makes Steinbeck's true mission as an author clear. And no, his mission was not to create kitsch. Here's a quote from the book to show you what I mean. When you collect marine animals, there are certain flatworms so delicate that they are almost impossible to capture whole, for they break and tatter under the touch. You must let them ooze and crawl of their own will onto a knife blade, and then lift them gently into your bottle of seawater. And perhaps that might be the way to write this book, to open the page and let the stories crawl in by themselves. Humans are delicate, and their experiences are delicate too. There is no forceful way to extract or collect them. What Steinbeck was trying to do was capture, as carefully, accurately, and truthfully as he could, people's stories. Even stories from the people who typically don't get to tell them, especially those people. Such a noble intent, and, at times, masterful execution of writing technique, places John Steinbeck firmly and inarguably in the canon of great American literature. As for me personally, if you couldn't already tell, he is in my pantheon of favorite authors, right alongside Cormac McCarthy, Dante Alighieri, and Ernest Hemingway, all of whom will likely make an appearance or two on this channel in the future. I'd love to hear your takes on John Steinbeck. What do you think of him? Are you a fan? Or maybe not? Any favorite or least favorite books of his? Do you remember tearing your hair out while reading about him in high school? Leave a comment down below. I greatly look forward to reading them. And if you got this far, why not subscribe? Certainly wouldn't hurt any. Finally, if you missed the last video, a link to that should be somewhere over here. I'm Philip. This has been On Thin Ice. And again, thank you for watching.